Rockstars, welcome to Epiphanish, a podcast that will change how you perceive everything. Maybe. And for you to recognise where you have choice and options in your own life. I'm your host and guide, Lisa Westgate, an award-winning mental health advocate, best-selling author, rockstar, life and business strategist of almost a decade, and mum of three. Remember to share this episode and your Epiphanish moment on socials, and please like, follow, share and subscribe on your favourite podcast platforms. Hey Rockstars! Today I wanted to give you a bit of background about myself and the origins of the Epiphanish podcast and where this all came from and kind of, what's the point of all of this. So I apologize ahead if I ramble a little bit, just because I'm speaking from the heart today. I'm going to aim to keep this to a shorter time frame episode. The episodes where I'm doing an interview and I have a guest on, they will probably tend to be longer episodes just because I've got some incredible guests that I'm excited to share with you on the podcast. So to give you a bit of background to the ramble also, I am a neurodiverse woman. So my brain tends to run down rabbit holes and flit around in the ether. So sometimes I can have a clear intention of what I want to speak to you about, and my brain decides that we're going to have a totally different conversation. And I've just learnt to roll with it, and I hope you can too. So to give you a bit of a background on me, my name's Lisa Westgate, which you know, and I have been in the coaching and personal development space for coming up to sort of 9 to 10 years. I came to the personal development and coaching space due to my own mental health challenges. So I'm kind of going to work in like reverse chronological order, however you say that word, and do my best to give you kind of a rundown for those of you who maybe have only seen me on socials or haven't super stalked me. I do also know that there are some of you listening that have been following me or engaging with me over that period of sort of 8 to 10 years at various points in that. I've had all sorts of people jump in and connect with me, which is always something I'm super open to. I love people. I love having conversations with people. I think human beings are really fascinating, particularly because my whole life I've really felt like a bit of an outsider or an observer of human interaction. It's never felt really natural for me, and it's only been, I guess, in my 40s, the last few years, that the penny drop has happened in terms of neurodiversity, because our awareness around that has grown, and we've recently gone through the process of assessment and diagnosis and all that stuff with my son. And as a lot of you would have experienced, I'm sure, if you've gone through that experience with your kids, it can definitely precipitate some deep reflection on our own childhoods and in our own school reports, which probably look the same as mine, which is, Lisa would have so much potential if she could just focus on her own work. Lisa needs to stop talking so much in class. Lisa needs to see projects through to the end, right? Give me a shout out in the comments of whatever platform you're listening or watching this on if that resonates. I'm sure it will. I've compared school reports with a few other people in my situation, and it's all terribly familiar. So yeah, I've always kind of been that weird kid that didn't really fit in, and then I was a weird teenager that kind of liked things that other teens didn't. I got really good at learning how to be social and, give the appearance of kind of like a regular teenager. But it's never it's funny, right? It's kind of hard to describe. It's almost like not being comfortable in my own skin, like I'm living someone else's life, or I've heard it described as like being an alien that's been dropped into a human body and having a human experience. Um, so yeah, it's always kind of been that way, that I was a bit on the outer or odd, or um, definitely not in the cool group, which is why if I want to be a rock star, I've got to declare it myself. Yeah, so I sort of, did the school thing, traveled overseas, did some stuff. I'm going to skip ahead to roughly about almost exactly 10 years ago, actually. It was November 2013. So if this podcast is a thing, way down in the future, I'm talking to you from the past, and it's October 2023. So yeah, roughly about 10 years ago, was my last on-road lights and sirensy shift as an ambulance paramedic here in Victoria. I don't know if you already knew that, maybe you did. And that was a role that I had been in since about 2005. So at that point, it was roughly 8 years that I'd been an ambulance paramedic. There was a series of events. I'm not going to go into the whole history today. It may or may not come up in the as Epiphanish continues, bits and pieces of my story might come out. If you're really interested and you have nothing else to do, I have previously uploaded my story to YouTube. So, if you're terribly unwell and horribly bored and you'd like to sit and watch a few hours of me tell my story in very great detail, it's there for you. Feel free to go watch that. That was recorded many years ago. Yeah, and in that I do go into some detail. So, please be aware, if you require a trigger warning, consider this a trigger warning. Incidentally, a bunny, like, here's my squirrel brain. Incidentally, I will not be putting trigger warnings on individual episodes. Please just be mindful and conscious of your own response and your own feelings while listening to these podcast episodes. Sorry, I'm gonna mute that. So because we are going to be talking about personal development, we are going to be talking about self-empowerment, we are going to be talking about choice, and some of the guests that I'm going to bring to you in conversation, and some of the episodes where I'm going to be a bit more like this, where I'm just going to be speaking to you directly, I'm going to touch on some pretty significant mental health topics as we go today. I'm going to give context to that. So please be really, mindful and conscious and aware of what's going on in your body, what's going on in your head. If you are finding anything you're listening to distressing, there is nothing wrong with hitting pause, coming back to us later, or putting it down and not coming back to us later. That's also fine. So do that, and make sure to practice your self-care practices. And self-care practices is something I'm looking at doing a whole episode on. So we will probably have a big conversation around self-care as well, and what that means, and also what it really means. Right, so to bring you back, end of 2013, I was diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety, and depression. I was taken what we call off-road, which basically means you can't work emergency work anymore. I was given a couple of months off to sort of sort myself out. And then I came back and I did some what they call light duties or alternative duties, which is kind of like office work or, data entry or, other roles within the organization that do not involve patients, do not involve driving lights and sirens. I reorganized a stock cupboard at a mica unit. I actually really enjoyed that. Bringing order to chaos is what I enjoy. So I actually really liked that day. That was great. So they found some other stuff for me to do, and while that was happening, I was going through some independent medical examinations, some assessments for my mental health, and it was basically determined that I was not fit for duty. I really wasn't in a position where it would be appropriate to put me back on road under the pressures of shift work and emergency work. So from August 2014, you'll have to excuse me, it's a bit blurry. I was officially off road, and I officially resigned August 2015 after my 10-year anniversary of being employed. And sort of 8.5 years in emergency work, that was. Because I reached a point in my wellness journey, which is probably something that we're going to talk about, where it would have really set me backwards had I made myself go back to that employment role. And I had people say to me, oh, if you're healed, why can't you come back to work? And I would say to them, well, you know, a recent alcoholic in recovery doesn't go and get a job as a bartender, right? So it's about not exposing yourself to the scenario and the situations that got you in the poo in the first place. Another quick sidebar with regards to explicit language. Naturally, my most comfortable flow of conversation does absolutely include swear words. I could blame my history as a frontline worker, so police, ambulance, fire. We tend to be a little mouthy. I don't apologize for swearing. I think it drives the point home often. I try not to, I guess, use it as an or an or a filler word, but that may occasionally happen as well while I think. So please, again, be mindful of the media that you're consuming, and if it doesn't work for you, that's totally cool. I'm all right with it. I've also laid that out to my guests. So my guests that are coming on here are also welcome to say shit or fuck if that's how they talk naturally. Obviously, we're not dialing it up for your discomfort. And I also appreciate that it doesn't suit everybody, and that's okay too. Right. So yeah, pretty much in that time between the end of 2013 and towards the end of 2015, I spent 3 months on the couch, wallowing in self-pity, trying on being a victim. The information I got from my doctors was, this is it. This is who you are now. Keeping in mind, I was 34. I got put on a temporary disability pension, and I was told that this is it. This is your life now. You have a disability, you have these significant mental health problems. The best we can do, the best we can offer you is to try and get your medications balance correct and try and avoid your triggers and manage your symptoms as best as you can. And I tried that on for 3 months, and I was a shell, a husk of a human lying on my couch while my family continued to whiz around me. It was a bit like being in a vortex. My husband continued to run the household. The kids got fed. They got lunches packed. They went to school. All the logistics of our household life continued without me. And I was there, but I wasn't present. I was totally disengaged, very much in my own bubble of hell. It was really cloudy. So the way that I have described it in the past, it was as if my head was full of cotton wool. It was very disassociating, disconnected from my family, from myself, from the world, just sort of floating along. Um, and I didn't like it, is the long and the short of it. And after about 3 months of that being my life and my kids coming and kissing me on the forehead and, hi, mummy, I hope you have a good, better day today. At that time, they were 2 and 12 and 14. Um, and, I would just sort of, mumble back, I love you. And that was really all I was capable of. And I just, sort of lay there and watched everything on the streaming services and vegged out. Like those veg out days that you have where your brain just switches off and you just like channel flip or whatever. It was kind of like that, but intensely. And I did it for 3 months running. Um, at about that point, at about that 3 month mark, I I really had a moment, I was spending time with my 2 year old, and he would sort of climb on me on the couch and try and get my attention and get my focus and engage with me. And I found it really upsetting. I'm like, yeah, I'm actually surprised that there's still some emotion when I'm telling you this story because I've done so much work and so much healing. But I guess when it comes to my youngest, I'm really, we're very close, and it's, I guess there'll always be a part of this that's pretty raw. So, yeah, he would want to connect with me because that's what young kids want to do. All kids, all people, right? And and I couldn't be the way I wanted to be with him. I couldn't be the mum that I wanted to be. We have a big gap between our kids. So when I met my husband, he already had 2 kids. So I've got 2 beautiful, beautiful step kids that I've been their mum since they were sort of 7 and 8. They're now in their 20s. And I really pushed, I really pushed my husband to have another because it was really important to me to get pregnant and have that whole experience and birth a child. And I had known that I had wanted to have that experience and be a mum in that way since I was about 18. So it was a really strong drive for me. I don't know if anyone can relate to that. It was almost like a thirst or a hunger. Like it was a very primal drive. So, I really fought to have my youngest. And when he was 2, I couldn't be the mum that I wanted to be for him. And I really credit him with I've told him many times that, I really think in that period of time, I had incredible support from my family. Like I've said for years, I don't think if the situation were reversed, if it was my husband that had been the disengaged cicada shell husk of a human on the couch and I had had to do all the things that he was doing, I don't know if I could have been in the supporting role and do all the things that he did. He really held us together. And I absolutely credit my 2 year old with saving my life because I think if he hadn't been there, if I hadn't had him, different timeline, sliding doors stuff, right? I'm not convinced that I would have been as motivated to get off that couch as I came to be. And I was pretty bloody motivated to get off that couch. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know which direction I was going. I didn't know what my life was going to look like. All I knew was that I was really fucking sick of myself. I was really sick of feeling like shit. I was really sick of being angry. I was really sick of being in pain. You know that phrase, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. That's absolutely where I was. And I really had no vision. If I could, people would ask me, therapists and healers would ask, well, what do you see in your future and where do you want to be going? And anytime I would visualize my future, it was just black. It was honestly, it was just a vacuum, a space, a void. I had no idea what that looked like. And so it wasn't a drive to get somewhere or to get something that got me off that couch. It was an absolute disdain for the situation I was in. It was absolute disgust with what I had allowed myself to devolve into. Now, caveat, talking to yourself like that, I wouldn't recommend. However, it really was how I felt at the time, that I was so appalled by what my life had become. I had been making life and death decisions for, nearly 10 years in healthcare. So I was in other forms of healthcare prior to ambulance before that. I had built a house on my own. As a single woman, I bought a block of land and I built a house. I mean, I didn't lay the bricks, right? I paid tradie like a builder, but I built a house on my own, right? So I was a very strong, independent woman. I had been financially independent. I had been decisive. That's who I was. And yet here I was some years later, just barely functioning as a human being. And there was such a disconnect between who I knew I was at my core and the life that I was experiencing and how I was living. And basically that difference between those two just got too much. And I was like, do you know what? Fuck it, I've got to do something. I've got to do something. I don't know what it is, but it's not laying here on the couch and it's not sitting here watching more shit on telly that I don't care about. And it was essentially that, moving away from motivation. We can either be motivated moving towards something that we want or moving away from something we don't want. And it was absolutely just that, moving away from motivation. That's all it was this right here is not okay. This right here will not do. And like I said, I'd been told what I'd been told from the doctors. I'd explored that as far as I could. That was all they could offer. And I realized I had to start looking elsewhere for the next thing, right? So getting better, whatever that looked like. I had no idea what that looked like. But improving my situation. And ultimately I had a series of phone calls and chance, in inverted commas, meetings with people. I now no longer believe in coincidence, but at the time I did. And I had a series of conversations which ultimately led me to be sitting in a classroom at my first life coaching type introductory weekend thing. I sat there with my arms crossed, my arms folded in front of me, slouched down in my chair, with a terrible, terrible attitude. Oh yeah? Prove it. Sure. What's this all about? I was not open to learning. I was not open in any way. My physiology was not open. My mind was not open. But I was there because I knew I had to give something a go. And it was in that first weekend or second weekend, one of those first few days of that training. And I remember sitting there with my scowl, my well-practiced scowl on. Some of you may have seen it, depending on how well you know me. And my arms folded. And the instructor, the trainer at the front of the room, was sort of going around the room and asking some questions. And, like, why are you here? What do you want? Those sorts of things. Goal setting stuff, really basic. And she got to me and asked me what I wanted, for the course, for my life. What do you want? And I began to rattle off a list. And it sounded like this, something like this. I don't want to be angry anymore. I don't want to be in pain anymore. I don't want to feel like shit. I don't want to not be able to exercise. I don't want PTSD. I don't want fibromyalgia. I don't want depression. I don't want to be on medication. There was probably more. And she patiently stood and listened and nodded. And when I finished, she asked me a question that I'm pretty sure changed my life, or was the beginning of a life-changing pathway for me. And what she asked me was, okay, well, I have a very clear picture of what you don't want. Could you tell me what you do want? And I went blank. Nothing. The void. The black. No idea. And what I realized in that moment from her question was that I had been focusing and putting all my energy into the life I didn't want. And I hadn't even considered the life that I did want. How could I move towards something if I don't even know what it is? If I don't have a vision for how I want my body to feel, if I don't have a vision for the healthy version of me, if I don't have a vision, and I don't mean like a vision like you have to close your eyes and see anything, right? I mean like just a concept, an idea, a glimmer of what I want. How can I even begin creating it? I ended up being at that coaching school for 18 months. I was there almost every weekend. I did every course that they had on offer. And I came to realize that I had fallen into a really common trap, which was what you focus on, you get more of. Where you put your energy, your attention, that grows. Now, there's a whole lot of explanation behind this, which I'm not going to go into today, but I just, if you could grab one, maybe this is your Epiphanish moment for today. Where is your focus going? What are you growing? Your brain, the part of your brain that controls this, is like a torch or a flashlight. It's a very focused beam of attention, and what you light up is what you see, and that becomes your world. What are you not seeing that is out of the realms of your torch light, that's in the dark, that if you were to shift your focus and attention and light up a different area, what's sitting there that you haven't even considered or thought about? That realization to me was genuinely life-changing. And I'm usually not prone to hyperbole, but it was actually life-changing because I started working on, over those 18 months, working on what does that look like? What is the life I want to create? And let's imagine, call me crazy. Don't call me crazy. Don't say crazy, Lisa. Let's imagine that your life is your life, that your life is your own, that it's your life. And if you don't like the life that you're living, what in that can you change? We can't change everything. We don't have control over every aspect of our lives. But what could we change? What do we have control over? So if I could create the life that I wanted and not sitting there, arms folded, in pain, pissed off, right, which was my permanent state, what would I choose instead? What life would I rather be living? That blew my mind. Okay. Now, I'm going to give you another. Here's the truth of it. The implication at that time, the person I was then, that I was responsible for all the things that had happened to me, that I was responsible for my shit life that I was leading, which was my perspective at the time, right? All these terrible things. I got very indignant. I got very angry. How dare you suggest that I have chosen to have PTSD? How dare you suggest that, this is any of my choice, right? I got very angry and very defensive of my current position, which I hated, right? When, if you think about it, it really doesn't make a whole bunch of sense. And you're going to hear that a similar exchange when I speak to one of my guests in a further episode. She had a very similar moment of getting defensive of her victimhood, I'm going to say. And I know that might be an upsetting word for me to say, and maybe that brings up some stuff for you, but that's where I was at the time. And it wasn't, she didn't intend to shame me, but I shamed me. I internalized shame around where I was and what my life was like. That wasn't put on me, but that's how I heard it. That's how I interpreted it, because of where I was and the way that I was seeing the world. So I spent 18 months working on this new life. What does it look like? How do I feel when I get up in the morning? How do I interact with my kids? How do I change the way that I see the world so that it doesn't make me fucking miserable anymore? And I did a lot of learning and a lot of unlearning. And some of those lessons is really what I'm aiming to share through this podcast. Come around to November 2015, I was just about to enter what's called Master Practitioner of NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. So it was a course, I had done the basic level, which is the practitioner course. I'd actually done it a couple of times and crewed a couple of times. So I actually ended up, I think I've done it maybe 4 or 5 times at this point, because I get something new every time, because I'm a different version of me every time. So I was rolling up to my school to embark on the Master Practitioner, which is really the next level of neuro-linguistic programming learning. And it was a 10-day program. It was a 10-day course. It's quite intense. We cover all sorts of, really interesting ways of looking at the world, including things like things to do with like the quantum. So the quantum being, how do I explain that to you guys? So basically it is that we are all energetically one. We're all, if you imagine that the quantum is like all the things, all the knowledge, all the awareness, all the atoms, everything that exists, and imagine it like a lake, and every individual is like a peer, like P-I-E-R, a peer that sort of sticks into the lake and can access the lake, right? So we are all connected to and part of and have access to the quantum field, the quantum knowledge, all the things, right? So to give you an example of how this kind of works is way back in the day, before we had technology and the internet and all sorts of things, there would be scientists in England and scientists in the United States, which were miles and miles apart from each other, that would come to, they'd have a very similar or the same scientific breakthrough at a similar time on different sides of the world. And then they'd usually argue about like who stole it from who. From a quantum point of view, if you subscribe to this sort of conceptual idea, that they both pulled from the quantum pool roughly about the same time, is that the idea wanted to come through and it found a couple of people to come through too. So that was to get a little esoteric. there is going to be some of that level of conversation in this podcast as well. And I encourage you to consider it and be open to it. Whether you're interested in sort of spiritual ideas or those sorts of higher level concepts, I hope you give it a try. Yeah, so I was about to enter this 10-day training, which is pretty high level. And I had been considering going off all my medications at that point. I had I'd been weaned down. I was on an incredibly low dose of my antidepressant every second day. So, I'm not a doctor. This is not medical advice. Coming off antidepressants is actually potentially really rough. So please, if you are looking at doing anything like that, do it supervised and very sensibly and very slowly under the guidance of your team. But that's where I was, and I was thinking that it might be time to try life without the medication that I had been on for that point, almost 10 years at that point. And I really wanted to know, how I would engage with the world, having done all the work that I had done to that point, over the last 18-month period prior to that. Now this new version of me, do I still need the medication? And to be honest, if it had been a failed experiment, I would have gone back on it. The day before the 10-day program was supposed to begin, the local pharmacy in my town where I lived, where I got my scripts filled, had an electrical fault with a fax machine and burnt to the ground. It really did happen. And I took that as a sign that it was time to give dropping the medication a go. So I have officially been medication and PTSD symptom free since November 2015 when the pharmacy burnt down. I wrapped up essentially my period of training and learning around that same time, the end of that year. And in the last 8 years have been seeing clients and been coaching and working with people on their mental health and helping them see the world from different perspectives and approaching challenges in different ways. I've done all kinds of things. I've done one-to-one coaching, group coaching. I've contributed to some books. I've won some awards. I've got some certificates. I've done a lot of speaking, heaps of different kinds of stuff. But ultimately, what I'm passionate about is opening people up to the idea that the way that we perceive the world is potentially not as concrete and solid as we think it is. It's a lot more fluid and up to interpretation. So that's really, this podcast is an extension of that. The reason that we are called Epiphanish is because I really hope that through listening to these episodes, listening to the amazing guests that have agreed to come on and chat, you'll be able to take away a little moment of awareness, of awakening, of, I hadn't thought of it like that before, or I've never looked at it that way, or something along those lines. Maybe not even in every episode. It may not be a full epiphany. It might not have you moving overseas or embarking on a new relationship. It may not be that big. It may be. Please let me know if anything you hear on this show really blows your mind. But it might be epiphanish, okay? It might be a little awareness or awakening or understanding that does change a trajectory or change a behavior or change a thought habit that hasn't been serving you. So that is my hope for you as my viewer and listener, is to be able to take something away that just has you firing slightly different neurons in your brain than maybe you have been doing. And realize that you have choice and options potentially where you feel like maybe you don't. So I am going to wrap things up. I please encourage you to engage in the comments on or the feedback on whichever platform you are experiencing us on. If you are watching us on YouTube, you can absolutely drop your feedback in the comments, or I'd love for you to share your Epiphanish moment as you go through. Also, a reminder to follow, share, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, wherever you're listening or watching. And also, please, if this really does, if there's something in it that really resonates with you, or you know someone who would benefit from something that you've heard, or just the general vibe of Epiphanish, please share us on your socials. Please let people know that these kind of conversations are happening and these things are an option. I truly hope that you do enjoy this podcast, that you really get value from it. And please let me know what resonates with you and what doesn't, because I am absolutely, definitely not perfect. It's my first crack at a podcast, so I am definitely open to learning. I'm sure I'll get better. Your first anything is usually not great, right? If you tried sourdough in COVID lockdowns, your first one probably didn't rise. All right, so be kind, be gentle, be compassionate, be curious to others and to yourself. And maybe we can make the world a kinder and more compassionate place to be for everybody. Thank you very much for tuning into Epiphanish. It is absolutely such a joy and pleasure and privilege to have you here. And I look forward to hearing from you very soon.